Tec Sounds presents EduTrends.
Welcome to the EduTrends podcast, conversations with experts from around the globe about the discovery and creation of the future of higher education and lifelong learning. I am Jose Pepe Escamilla, Director of Tec Labs, an educational innovation unit of Tecnológico de Monterrey. Over the past 3 decades, I have been working on innovative pedagogies and learning technologies. I hope this EduTrends podcast will help us understand the future of learning. I recently visited MIT to meet with a longtime friend, Philipp Schmidt. He is the Director of Learning Innovation at the MIT MediaLab, where he leads the MediaLab Learning Initiative, teaches courses, and conducts research on learning communities. In the future, we envision more agency on the learner and less dependency on a formal teacher. The work of Philipp is clearly pointing to that future. We talk about the power of open communities and the impact of peer-to-peer universities. I hope you find our talk interesting. So it's great to be here, Philipp, in MIT Media Lab with you.
Yeah, great for you to visit.
We've known ourselves for how long? Maybe 10 years?
More than 10 years, I would say.
More than 10 years.
Did we first meet at the Open Education meeting in Utah?
Okay.
Or at the Open Courseware meeting in Santander?
I think it was in Utah.
Okay.
In Utah, yes. Since then, you've been doing lots of stuff in the open resources community.
Yeah, I would say more open learning. Open communities. I was never so excited about the open resources alone. Both, I think the name was very confusing, Open Educational Resources, OER. Mm-hmm. And then also, I always thought that if you're interested in learning and education, the content in a way is the least interesting part. It's like you need content, of course, but more interesting is people working on projects together, getting recognition for your learning. Like those are the interesting things for me. The content was always just, I guess, a necessary enabler of those other things to happen. But I have spent a lot of time working on content for someone who's more interested in things, not content. Like when we were working on Open Courseware together, I think the significance of Open Courseware for me was I was actually working more on open source software communities before. So how do people get together and collaborate, even though they don't know each other in person, they don't work for each other, they don't get paid necessarily. Some people, of course, get paid, and they form around some shared interest, and they're able to build very sophisticated projects with lots of people in lots of countries, and they can coordinate them. It's like all the things that traditionally we would say a firm is really good at, because you hire people, you direct the work. All of a sudden, this other model emerged that was not a forum. It was much more bottom up. Everyone could join or leave, and it was able to produce really high quality work. For example, Linux, the operating system, or Apache, or most of the software that runs the internet today was built by open source communities. So I was much more interested in open source communities. And then when Open Courseware happened, I realized that the core ideas within those communities could be applied to other areas. And quite frankly, the education community was a much friendlier community than the software community.
It's good to know.
No, it's true. I remember, do you remember the UNESCO OER mailing list?
Uh-huh.
Susan D'Antoni started this mailing list for people working on open education around the world. And that was one of the first groups that I communicated with. And I was amazed by when I communicate on the open source software mailing lists, it's very confrontational. It's about like you're wrong, you're right, you're an idiot. Yeah, people are calling each other names. Flame wars, arguments. And I get on its other mailing list, and everyone is so polite and is like
so friendly
and so helpful. And when they disagree, there's like 3 paragraphs where they first apologize, and then there's like a very small disagreement. And I thought this is a much better community to be a member of than those crazy guys over there. So that's how I got into OpenCourseWare, and I was living in Cape Town at the time, and access to education is a much bigger issue in South Africa than it is in Germany or where I grew up or the US. And so I became very interested in both having access to the content, but also what I saw was kind of a few elite universities in America publishing their content with this assumption, maybe not even by MIT, but I think the rest of the world assumed that, oh, this is perfect. Now MIT can teach everyone. So all those people in Africa that need education, they can now get MIT's content. And I thought that was incomplete or maybe a wrong way of thinking about this. Like the way I thought about open was about participation. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it was very important that like African scholars producing content.
I remember that in the founding board of OpenCourse, where we have those discussions on, it's not only to publish some content, but also to make sure that the learner is taken into account somehow. No, it's not enough to say this is the best content that I publish. This is how you make sure that the person that is in the other side participates, constructs his own knowledge.
Yeah, and I remember so I ran these projects at the University of the Western Cape, which is in Cape Town, there's a few universities, and University of the Western Cape is the poor university that is predominant, or at the time was predominantly non-white students. It also had a really proud history. So a lot of the ANC, the anti-apartheid movement, when they came back from exile, they came to UWC, got an appointment there, and then from there went into the Mandela administration as ministers. And so UWC had been the first university in South Africa to declare itself non-racial, which was during apartheid. So they broke the law, essentially. But it was a little bit outside of the city. It was definitely poorer students, didn't have a lot of resources. And so I ran a few projects there, which I really enjoyed, which did exactly what you just described. One is we involved the students in actually creating the content. So they would have little recorders, kind of like this setup, and they would go to their classes. They would talk to their lecturers, and they would say, can we record the content because we want to share it with the other people in the class? They got the lecturers to agree, and then they recorded the lectures, they collected the materials, they shared their notes, and they built this internal knowledge sharing community that then went beyond the content. They would say, okay, there were some nursing students, next week we're going to go do our field trials, make sure you get your vaccinations because it's important for the field trial. So it became this kind of, knowledge sharing community. And in another class, we were teaching essentially learning with technology, or, what's happening with digital technology that students should be aware of. And one of the sessions I taught about Wikipedia. And the only activity was you have to edit a Wikipedia article, and the goal is that your edit is still there 1 week later. And so
it's not got down by the
exactly by the bots or by the other editors,
by the editors or whatever.
And so
it's a quality article.
People had to think about, okay, well, first of all, who writes Wikipedia? Who edits Wikipedia? Because there's this perception it's low quality, right? Uh-huh. And what you very quickly discover, if you add something that's incorrect, it's immediately removed, right? Mm-hmm. Either by bots or by other people. And so they learned a lot about how these open communities participated. But then there was one student, she corrected an article about a jazz musician from Cape Town because she knew that he had been born in a city that was called Athlone, which the article said was Cape Town. And technically it was not Cape Town. It's a suburb of Cape Town, but it's its own city. And she was a big fan, so she corrected the article. and the edit stayed in the Wikipedia article for the week. Actually, stayed much longer. But the sense of ownership or kind of agency that this woman had, that I could see, right? Like she, first of all, using this technology, participating in this global community as someone from Cape Town in an under-resourced university, and her voice remained there. It was just such an amazing moment that like really stayed with me. And so for me, this sense of participation is much more important than like getting access to cheap textbooks.
Just a funny anecdote. We have a group of faculty members that do something similar. Some of them are English as a foreign language teachers of our students. And so they ask their students, go to the Wikipedia and look for, I don't know, enchilada or quesadilla or whatever. And they find out that enchilada is a Taco Bell delicacy or something like that. They say, no, that's not true. So he challenged them to look for Mexican stuff also in the Wikipedia, not only food, that is not accurate, so that it becomes really motivated to look at what are the rules, how to change that, and how to correct that for some kind of pride.
And the interesting thing about that is that it's actually more important to correct the English Wikipedia than it would be to correct the Spanish Wikipedia or language Spanish, not national. So, for example, in South Africa, English is one of the national languages, but in the Middle East, people are much more concerned about the English Wikipedia having incorrect data and content than their own Wikipedia in a way, because the English Wikipedia is so widely used by everyone in the world. And also it's so ignorant sometimes, right? Because it's predominantly written by people.
It can be also replicating some stereotypes, for instance.
Exactly. And so it's interesting that like as a global community, so, okay, fine, we decide we're going to use one language, predominantly, in this case, it'll be English, but we all there's this tension around, well, who is the expert, right? Like, if this is my country, I should be writing about these things, but these other people far away have already written the whole article. And so those things I find super interesting. And that only happens through these open community, or not only, but the open communities have really, I feel like, started that. And I don't see the same sense of connection in social media today, for example. I don't know what your take is, and maybe I'm a grumpy old guy now. But in social media, I have to really search for the meaningful personal connections that are surprising to me. I can communicate with people I already know. That works really well. But like entering an open community and then, coming in with the sense of respect and shared interest in helping, I don't encounter a lot of that in social media these days. And I feel like in the early days of open source and open courseware and open communities, that was much more the norm. Like you would constantly meet new people online that were extremely open and helpful in sharing and working together. And it's kind of a more welcoming space in a way. And maybe I'm wrong. When you look back, you only remember the good things. But
I think there were flame wars also in the groups like Alta whatever,
That's the Usenet,
Usenet, exactly. But I agree with you that there was this dream that the internet will make us closer and more diverse, and it's not necessarily what is happening. I think is get the algorithms like in Facebook or whatever at putting us in contact with people that are more like us instead of people that are more diverse. And so we think sometimes that our truth is the only truth. And maybe that's one of the reasons that people are getting so polarized these times everywhere.
Yeah, I would agree. In a way, when we were bad at internet, like we couldn't, it was really hard to find things. It was really messy. All these crazy people were posting things. You were forced to engage much more. Whereas now is where we've become extremely good at searching and filtering and curating content. It's almost like we don't get to see the outside of our bubble anymore, right? Like you only see things that are similar to you or they're even designed to make you angry about certain things that the algorithm knows you're going to get angry about, because it turns out anger is a more engages more and makes you share more than being surprised or encountering something new.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little bit too bad, but also it's kind of amazing how the world has changed. Like I actually wanted to become a filmmaker at one point. That was my dream. And I discovered the internet, the web, in my university. And it completely changed my trajectory because this idea of this global network and people connecting was just so compelling. And it is amazing to see, my dad calls me on FaceTime and I can talk to him and I can see him and I can, when we leave here, we will order, on a tiny device, we'll press a button and a car will appear driven by, someone who does this as a job and then drop us somewhere else. It's amazing. The world, but the change is also, the pace of change, I think, can be a little bit disorienting sometimes.
Great. Well, tell me, I think I asked you this before. What took you from Germany to Cape Town? It's too personal, maybe.
No, but,
okay.
It's usually either work or it's a person. So
okay.
In this case, it was originally a person.
Okay.
And I guess the other thing is I was, I'd gotten into IT and technology through the internet, and there was a lot of opportunities for people with tech skills at the time. There were really not many software developers and engineers at the time. And so I was kind of going into having my first jobs, and I wasn't so interested. I very quickly discovered that I wasn't so interested in a traditional industry job, and that I was more interested in how can you use these technologies for kind of more social benefits. And when I had the opportunity then to move to Cape Town, I was looking for jobs that would connect those two, and I found a really incredible job with an organization called bridges.org that doesn't exist anymore, but they wrote, before I came, they wrote one of the first reports on the global digital divide. Mm-hmm. And they developed a methodology, and that was while I was there, on how to design technology for social change. And that I still think it was called Real Access, Real Impact. I still think is one of the more useful frameworks that people have developed. And everyone continues to disregard basically building technology for the poor. So the person was the reason why I moved there, but then it happened to coincide with this personal interest of connecting my tech skills with a more social purpose, and I found a really interesting job, and
a fertile environment for your
fertile environment, yes. And then I got a dog, and once you have a dog, you can't leave, and so I got to keep the dog when we broke up. So the dog and me stayed in Cape Town.
Great. It was at that time also that you were involved in the foundation of Peer-to-Peer University?
So I started Peer-to-Peer University living in Cape Town. Originally, I worked for Bridges. Then I did some time working with the University of the Western Cape. And then through the open courseware work, that was basically the idea. There's all this content now. How can you bring together people that would use the content in a completely non-formal way, so outside of institutions? And I started talking about this idea with Neeru Paharia, who was I think she was the first executive director of Creative Commons when it was still based out of Stanford. And she was just an interesting thinker in that space. And Neeru and I met at some conferences, and we started talking about these ideas. And the early days, you stay up very late, maybe you drink a lot as well, but you're talking about all these dreams that you have and it was like one of those conversations. And then we would run into each other at conferences. And then one conference I remember, she actually came up with the term peer-to-peer university. Mm-hmm. And somehow, and one of the things I learned through that is like branding is super important, because once you have a name, it can capture the imagination in a way that a concept cannot. And so when we met at this conference where she came and we were sharing ideas, and she had found this name, I knew we were going to have to do this thing now. And so Neeru, myself, Stian Haklev, Delia Brown, and Joel Thierston. Joel actually joined a little bit later, but the four of us were all at this conference. And we basically spent the whole time at the conference just thinking about, okay, what is this going to look like? And I was living in Cape Town. We were all living on different continents, actually. Delia in Australia, Neuron in the US, Stian, I think, in Norway. And so we would organize these calls and we would start, trying this out ourselves. Like, where do we find the materials? We tried to learn psychology, and then the Shuttleworth Fellowship came and really gave us the resources that we needed to make it happen.
So peer-to-peer university, which the name, by the way, embraces this idea of people producing stuff, not only consuming because it's from one person to another. It's not a granting degree university or a credit degree university. It's more a place where it's more free and you can learn. There are objectives, or there's some assessment or not. I think there are even two phases of peer-to-peer.
There were.
You can talk about maybe.
I would say the main difference was the first phase was entirely online, and the second phase is almost entirely offline. Mm-hmm. So the only thing that's still online is the content. But originally the people would meet in small groups online, in usually Skype calls or something. They would find a topic that they were interested in. Usually one person would take the lead and maybe start looking around for some curriculum or some materials. But then as a group, they would design their own course and then run through the course. And usually most of those courses had some kind of a project at the end. We had people from all over the world come together. Often they took really interesting materials from universities, from OpenCourseWare, combined it with other things, had really fascinating conversations and connections. And that sense of, one, being able to do this without the professor was very powerful. And then two, doing it with this group of people that you didn't know before, and you made really great friends in the process. And so one of the challenges was, if you do this only online, and this was starting in 2008, so it's a long time ago, the people who were online were in some way privileged. Maybe they didn't have an elite university degree, maybe they didn't have a ton of money, but they had the ability to communicate very well in English generally. They had the time and the money to spend online, they had computers, they had enough education that they were able to organize themselves, and they were privileged in a way that they didn't need a degree, right? So they could survive or get jobs or be successful without degrees. Often they already had degrees or they were getting degrees somewhere else. So it was a little bit frustrating that we were kind of creating this new model for education, but it was serving a somewhat privileged audience. And so we ran into a crisis when the MOOCs emerged, because at least the perception was that you wouldn't need peer-to-peer university anymore. Like, you don't have to learn with a bunch of amateurs online if you can learn from the best professors in the world. Again, like with OpenCourseWare, we're all going to learn from MIT and Harvard now.
Yes, and also MOOCs like Coursera, edX, or whatever. Originally, the idea was that it was for people that were not able to have access to education. And in fact, when you look at the statistics, a big part of the people that are accessing those courses are people that have already some education, some university education, or even advanced degrees.
Exactly. So it took them like another 4 or 5 years to realize that what we had realized already, that the people who are online, who are participating, are privileged. The bad thing, which turned out to be a good thing, was that our funders disappeared, because they said, well, we don't have to fund a small amateur group anymore. We can now either give money to the MOOCs, or actually we don't have to give money, because the MOOCs had venture capital and all this money. So we ran into this crisis where we were deciding, okay, does it make sense? Should we just close the project? And I had met someone from a public library at some conferences. And I spoke to her. We were always having great conversations about learning communities, but we never really found a thing to work on. And so when we found ourselves in this moment of crisis, I said, okay.
In Spanish, we say necessity is the mother of invention.
Perfect. That's exactly what happened. So we were like, okay, either we're going to close, or we have to go back to our original goal, which is really increase opportunities for education. And it turns out that the only way we could do this was to partner with an institution that was face-to-face. And the public library at the same time was trying to figure out what to do about online learning, because they knew digital was coming and people were questioning, why do we need libraries? Everything is going to be online, which is kind of a crazy assumption actually, but initially might seem reasonable. But so they were struggling to justify their existence. And so it was just kind of this perfect combination where this gave them the ability to be relevant in the digital space, and it gave us access to a community of learners that we would never be able to reach otherwise. And the model, it turns out the model of peer-to-peer learning translated really well. And also we didn't invent the model, right? Like there are learning circles in Sweden and lots of other countries for hundreds of years. But just having this kind of methodology where it's very easy for the public library to advertise a course, select some materials from the open courseware or other open resources, and then people come together in the physical space and they get some handouts for like how to structure their interaction. Turns out that works really well. People are really good at learning with each other when they're self-motivated and they kind of get that sense of ownership of the process. It really creates a totally different learning environment. So the values stayed exactly the same, even though it looks totally different now. And we're doing really well now. So yeah, the crisis led us into a much better direction.
And are you serving a different kind of public now, or
yeah.
is
no, totally different. So the initial courses we were working with Chicago Public Library, and I remember like the very first iteration. So before this had been tested, we had some people participating who were homeless, who didn't have a job, who didn't have a college degree, really struggling. This sounds stupid, but when I saw the photos, the faces were not white and young. It was all different colors and different ages, and the sense of accomplishment that I think the participants had was totally different from the online. So it's a completely different audience. The responsibility to serve them becomes much more higher stakes, right? Like now if you work with a bunch of geeks online who don't need degrees, it doesn't matter if things don't work. Now you feel a bigger sense of responsibility because for these learners, maybe this is a more important aspect of their education. But yeah, so very different audience. We still also get people who are more, I would say, like gentlemen or gentlewomen learners, people who learn for fun and they're maybe retired or they have a few degrees. But that's the minority now. The majority is people who are trying to get ahead in life, get a better job, or improve their skills.
Yeah, why do you think that for this kind of public, this kind of learners, face-to-face is better than online? Because I don't think it's a matter of access to technology right now. I'm not sure. I think there should be other factors.
Actually, it's a couple of things. And sadly, I think this in many ways is less the case in countries like South Africa, or I don't want to make assumptions about Mexico, but sadly in the US, there is actually a large part of the population that does not have reliable access to broadband internet.
Okay.
And the public library is the number one space where those people go to access the internet. Mm-hmm. And so they're using the internet there to look for jobs, to search for information. Health information is huge. So there is the access thing through the library that's important. I think the other piece is learning to be a good learner takes some time, right? And so if you go through a great school experience or a great university, you get very good at being a learner. And that involves a lot of skills around self-motivation, structuring your process, communication, digital communication, which if you haven't had a really solid education background, you may not have developed those skills. And those things are easier to do face-to-face. If you're sitting around a room, it's easier to pick up, are people happy, or are we excited, or make a connection with other people. And then the meeting once a week with a group of people is a huge motivator, because on Tuesday night I'm going to be at the public library, and if I don't show up, the other people know that I didn't come. online, it's like, well, the webinar is on Tuesday night, I'll watch the recording later, it's like, I think it's much easier to not participate.
So this peer-to-peer university is a pure form, or what in education we call informal learning, because it's non-structured, has no clear objectives, is driven by self-motivation. And I don't know if you have some stories that you can share of people that have had success stories of peer-to-peer university.
Of the participants?
Yes.
Yeah, I can. And actually, but let me make one comment quickly. You use the term informal. I've heard some people say they prefer the term non-formal. But I was talking to someone just a couple of days ago that like all the things we're excited about start with none. Like, like we're always negating something. And so I feel like we should turn it around, and it should be like beyond formal or super formal, or like the others should be the negative ones. We should be the positive ones. We're for something exciting. Anyway, that's an aside. But well, just one example. There's a bunch of public libraries in East Africa that have run basic web development courses very, very successfully. Mm-hmm. And they have actually created a bunch of businesses. So people taking those courses are now creating websites and getting paid to create the websites for the businesses in their local communities. So that's kind of the extreme end. You create your own business, you launch it, now you can make money based on this experience with peer-to-peer university. I think more common is a more, I guess, the changes that I think help people get ahead are more a sense of confidence that you're able to complete an education program. A lot of people who participate in peer-to-peer university have had very unsuccessful experiences in education. Right? They failed things, they dropped out of things, they couldn't complete their degree. So now they're completing a course, and that's like a sense of accomplishment. And then they're building skills of collaboration with other people, motivating themselves, accessing digital materials. So it's those kinds of things are going to serve them really well going forward. But it's not that that's going to be enough to get a great job or enter a formal degree. And so the piece that I think is still missing is, those anecdotes from Africa, they shouldn't just be anecdotes. There should be more. But also, I think having a way from this experience into formal education would be extremely valuable for our participants. So let's say through peer-to-peer university, you build up your confidence, some of the skills, maybe you improve your math or your writing, and then you enter a degree program at a community college or a local college, and you do maybe a 2-year degree or maybe a 4-year degree. If we can create that pathway and help people be more successful at that, I think that then we're really, then I would say we're really successful.
Another possibility would be preparing yourself to take a test that will somehow certify that you have the knowledge.
Sure, yeah.
That there are, for instance, tests for high school or tests for, you don't have to do high school, you have to do a test.
Yeah, that's another possibility. But
You don't seem very excited.
Well, I'm not so excited about tests in general. I must admit, even though I understand that they're extremely important, but they're kind of an unnecessary evil. But I think you're right. I should be more excited about them. And if it's a test that certifies your skills and that gives you a job, that's great. So I think,
Well, sometimes there are some for credit degrees or whatever that you need in your life to show up in some places. No,
you're 100% right.
It's a necessary. What is evil? Okay, unnecessary evil. So, was peer-to-peer university that took you to the United States?
Indirectly, not a too personal question, but there are probably some aspects of how I came to the US that I don't necessarily want to disclose. But anyway, through the conversation, so I've been, as we had met in the context of MIT OpenCourseWare and then OpenCourseWare Consortium, I'd started spending more time at MIT and with people at MIT. And someone I had collaborated with for peer-to-peer university was Joey Ito, who became the director of the MediaLab. And I had some conversations actually with a separate group at MIT about possibly doing some work together. And I felt ready to leave Cape Town. And I was a big fan of MIT. I thought the values here were, like there was a lot of open in the DNA here. They had created open source software. Richard Stallman was here, OpenCourseWare. So I felt like the values here were very aligned with mine. And then, MIT has this incredible reputation, which I think of as a platform. Like the crazy thing is when you're sitting in Cape Town by yourself running peer-to-peer university and you say certain things about peer learning is going to change education, a bunch of people, crazy people like you, may listen to you, right? And you can build up an audience. If you say exactly the same things sitting at MIT, everyone will listen to you. And they're like, oh my God, MIT said peer-to-peer learning is going to change the way education works. The smart people at MIT. So it was, I knew this was an amazing opportunity. If I could find a way to bring my ideas and my work into this context, I would find lots of collaborators that would be values aligned, and the possibilities would grow. And so the conversations I had with the MediaLab were actually around, could peer-to-peer university become part of the MediaLab? And I was going to take this other job at MIT. And in the conversations, I really fell in love with the MediaLab and the people here. And I didn't enjoy the other conversations so much. So in the end, I decided that didn't work out. And Joey had become the director here. He invited me to come here as a director's fellow, because he'd also seen me engage with the other people here, and it just kind of was a much better fit. So he made me a fellow in residence, which means he invited me to spend 2 years here, still running peer-to-peer university, but collaborating with people at the MediaLab. And so then I partnered with Mitchell Resnick, who's a professor here, and we created this online course that looked more like the kind of learning experiences that we were interested in. Mitchell's background is, he's really one of the leaders in what he calls creative learning.
Lifelong learning kindergarten?
Lifelong kindergarten, yeah. Okay. So his group is called Lifelong Kindergarten. He wrote, kind of the framework he uses is called creative learning, but it builds on constructivism or constructionism, which was Seymour Papert's kind of pedagogy. He was an early faculty member here. He was Mitch's advisor. Mitch then became a faculty member here. And so Mitch brings this approach around creative learning, projects, tinkering. And then I had this approach of online and peer-to-peer learning. And so we kind of brought those things together, and we ran an online course that turned out to be very, very successful for educators, called Learning Creative Learning. And there were a few iterations, and we built a bunch of tools to support it. Like, half the things didn't work. It was really a lot of fun. And so through those projects, I discovered, and the MediaLab, I think, discovered that there was a lot more that the MediaLab could be doing in digital learning. And it made sense to position it as what's called an initiative. So I work across all of the research groups at the MediaLab. I'm not a silo research group that goes deep like Mitch's, but I collaborate and support anyone who wants to work with us on learning. Okay.
But you will tell me a little bit more what it is to work with a MediaLab. But you say that you didn't like testing, but one of your first works in MIT MediaLab was block certs, which is related to certifying in the blockchain that someone has learned.
Yes.
Is there something that I'm missing?
No. Well, I never said that I was consistent in my... No. So in my defense, the motivation behind block certs came out of the open badges work that I'd done many years before, which was really an effort to break the monopoly of the formal credential. Right? So you could only get a formal credential for the tests from the big universities. And many people, including myself, thought that there's a lot of learning that happens outside of those formal settings, where people work on open source software projects.
I will agree.
Yeah. And there's really no way to get recognition for those, or it's very difficult to get recognition for those. And so we thought if we create a credential called an open badge, and all kinds of institutions could issue those. So it could be a museum of science where you're doing a workshop, or it could be an open source community that gives badges for its best contributors, or it could be a group of people giving badges to each other, community based. Then we would democratize the credential essentially. Didn't really work out that way. And as usual, you start with big dreams, idealistic dreams, and you reach, if you're fortunate, you'll reach 70 or 80% of that. But that was my interest in the degree or in credentials. When block certs, when the Bitcoin kind of emerged, I became interested in Bitcoin and blockchains as a platform to bring the open badges, because one of the tricky things with open badges, why I think they didn't take off in the way that we had hoped, was one, high stakes credentials were very rare, so universities didn't really use them for their diplomas. They used them for soft skills and all kinds of smaller things. And then secondly, they were very hard to verify. So trusting them was a little bit tricky, I think, for employers. And blockchain seemed like a solution for the verification part. And also, I was just interested in this new technology. Like the best way, the MediaLab way of learning is, if you're interested in something, you go and build something with it. That's really the best way. So we built a bunch of prototypes here, and they were specifically not for the big tests and the big, but they were for things in our community. So we gave the first ones to the Director's Fellow. So I was a Director's Fellow, so I built something to award myself a credential. So always a good start. And then secondly, to the MediaLab alums. So all the alums who came to the 30th anniversary, they got a credential from us. And we even had physical ones as well. So this idea of challenge coins that signal membership in a community. Like I thought that was much more interesting as a community token rather than like an identity card, right? Like here's my driver's license. That was less interesting with the big authority issuing the driver's license. It was more interesting, like as a community, what are the credentials that count within our community? What are the behaviors we recognize? So my approach into this was, I think, from a very different direction. But now, as we're working on this together, again, I think we've ended up in a space that's much more formal, much more traditional, much more related to tests and skills. But I think I'm quite happy about it because, we talked about this a little bit before, but if you're trying to get adoption for a very new and maybe challenging idea, sometimes having the thing that people are used to, translated to that new idea is a good way of making them comfortable. So what I mean is, if we're talking about these new digital credentials, they're gonna represent all these diverse learning experiences, and some of them are even issued by communities. Then getting people to that point is going to be hard. But if we say, hey, your university diploma, right? Everyone knows what a university diploma is. You already get a piece of paper or maybe even a PDF. We're going to give you a much better version of a digital diploma that exists today. Then everyone is going to say, oh, this is for a university diploma. This makes sense. And then from there, 10 years down the line, I'm hoping that we'll end up in this place where lots of people are issuing credentials for lots of different things, and you can stack them together and combine them and have a totally new education experience. And
so you're starting from the other side of open badges instead of starting from the non-degree things. You're starting from the degree things to later go to conquer the other part.
And I mean, let's see if it, let's see if it works this time, basically.
That's it. That's the idea.
And that's also one of the things where it's like, okay, is this platform of MIT, like, what's the most powerful way that we could use that to drive innovation that's maybe very challenging or very novel, but because MIT and tech and other institutions are behind it, people are going to say, oh, this is a serious thing. Like we should be, you know, these guys must know what they're doing. And so, well, this is my attempt to try it this way.
And some weeks ago, MIT and other 8 universities, a total of 9, where Tec de Monterrey is one of them, announced the creation of a group around digital credentials.
Yeah.
What's the difference between the rest of your work and this?
What's the difference, or
is an evolution, or is
no? This is, for me, this is the logical evolution. Like the piece for the earlier prototypes that we were trying to learn how the technology works, and then the point that got me to was I became very interested in so I realized that if you have a standard in this space, it could be a very powerful thing, because in some way it recognizes or it represents your personal academic history. And especially now as higher education is changing and people are not just learning, like they're not doing college degree work, but they're doing school, a little bit of college, maybe a degree, some work, more college, some online courses, more work, for the rest of your life. Having a way to tell that story becomes much more important.
Gary Matkins calls it from UC Irvine the 60-year university.
The 60-year curriculum.
Curriculum,
yeah,
okay.
Exactly. That's exactly the idea. So then being able to represent that experience becomes much more important, but also much more powerful. And so the governance question became really central to me. It's not really about the technology. Obviously, you want to build the best technology, but it's really about the governance of this technology that I became interested in. And so the fact that we were able to bring together 9 universities like this, who had all done work in this area, who have expertise in-house with these technologies, who are able to issue credentials using this standard, and who are willing to become stewards of a standard like this, right? So onboarding other people into this, trying it out, and then also making sure that the interests of the learners and the institutions are represented first, and then letting everything else follow. That was extremely attractive to me. Like the fact that we would be, would be able to build this community of higher education institutions that are becoming stewards of a global standard for digital credentials. That's a great opportunity and really fun to be working on.
It will be nice if you can give a possible scenario for one kind of user or whatever in 5 years from now of how it will work, so that we get an idea of.
Yeah, it would work. I think maybe we should do this together, but maybe
Yes.
we can find 2. I think it will work for the very traditional normal learner, where they go to a college, they get a degree, and then they want to use this degree to get a job, and maybe they change jobs and they have to present it to a new employer. And then maybe a few years down the line, they want to use the first degree to apply for a master's degree somewhere. So every time they show that credential to someone, that other person has to verify it. They have to go back to the institution that issued it. Sometimes they have to pay money. There's a lot of fraud. It's actually hard to verify some degrees, especially if you're interested in maybe studying abroad. So all those things are going to be made much easier. You basically have a digital credential that you could store on your phone or in the cloud or somewhere. And when you present it to someone, they can instantly verify that it hasn't been tampered with, that you are the person who should hold this credential, and that the institution that issued it is really the institution that you think issued it. So it just reduces a lot of friction, makes that transfer easier, improves basically everyone's interaction with the credential. Then I think the much more interesting case is, imagine, and let's say a European student, because there's the regulatory framework there exists. It's just the implementation is tricky. In theory, in Europe, you could be taking any kind of credit from any kind of university, and you could stack those things together and get a diploma from any of the European universities. In practice, that's almost impossible to do. And so the technology, I think, will make it easier to start doing those things. And I think the practice will then follow. So I imagine, and this is totally what I would have loved to do when I was younger, that you do a semester in Berlin, then you do a semester in Madrid. Maybe you move to the Black Forest for a year because the big city is too expensive, or you want to be, more quiet. You go to the
to take the Monterrey.
So in my case, you go to the Black Forest, to a very small, actually more, not a community college, but a kind of a second tier technical college. Then you go to the Tec de Monterrey for 1 year, in my case. And then at the end of this, right, you have collected all these credentials from all these places. You then go to one place and they say, let me have a look at all this collection. And this one piece is missing. But if you do this additional course, then I will give you a bachelor's degree or a master's degree for your experience. So I think we are going to see a lot more of that happening. And if once that, and maybe an online course and, face to face. And once you're trying to do this, the ability to bring those things together and verify them becomes essential, because nobody is going to want to verify 15 different pieces of paper from 15 different institutions and trying to make sense of all of that. When that is digital, it just becomes much easier to do.
And for me also, it's very appealing on this future that you can show credentials of things or skills that make sense in the real world for employment, for example, that you're
rather than a university
diploma. That is a way of, maybe I'm shooting my foot, but
good that we both work at a university.
Yes, but maybe I will not work in the university in 10 years. I don't know, or maybe arriving home. But the idea that people can get a job or can get, or some responsibility because they can show that they are capable of doing something without having a university diploma is very appealing to me. And the possibility also that what you have learned either in an online course, a bootcamp, or a peer-to-peer university learning circle, and that you can take that not only on a job, but also in a university and get credit, I think that future is very appealing. Also that there's no line dividing the formal and non-formal or informal or non-structural, whatever you want. Super formal way of learning. And it becomes a real marketplace of learning. All things are accessible for you. It's very appealing.
Or maybe a bazaar of learning, use the open source. The bazaar versus the cathedral article by Eric Raymond, which is one of the kind of fundamental open source articles. Because I like bazaar because it's a little messier. Whereas market is, at least in the US, market, you immediately think corporations, right? And I'm curious in your thoughts on this. I think we both got into digital learning with kind of the idea that it would increase opportunities, lower costs, make the experience better, and kind of make education better as a whole for more people. And the research often shows that introducing technology, especially in education, has generally benefited those who were already doing fine. So like the divide in a way is getting even bigger, because now if I have a good degree and I am privileged, I can now take these MOOCs and I'm getting new skills, and the employers are looking for those skills. So the people who aren't able to do this are falling further and further behind. So that is one thing that worries me about our new effort. How do we make sure that this really benefits everyone, and how do we make sure that it's not entirely driven by the market of what employers want? Because I think there's something magical in education that we can't explain, and that we should feel more confident about not being able to explain. Whereas our universities are constantly being asked by employers, give us those skills, demonstrate your ability. And well, maybe you disagree on this, but I think, and actually the Media Lab's 3 indicators that we use for evaluation are uniqueness, impact, and magic. And magic is the thing you can't explain, but there's something around the university or education or spending time with other people that's like less directed, less instrumental, less functional, then makes you a different person. And I don't want to lose that in a way. And maybe that's a luxury, but maybe we should not forget to create more of that luxury for more people if we make everything more efficient.
Yes. I disagree a little bit with one part of what you said. This idea that online learning doesn't work or only works for the people that are privileged. I think that more self-directed online learning, it's more directed to privileged people that already have some education or higher education and that are self-directed learners.
Yeah.
Learn how to learn. But if you give them more support in the form of tutoring or other kind of things, then you have some successful cases, at least that I'm aware of, in Africa, in India, maybe even in the United Kingdom with the British Open University, in Latin America also. So maybe the magic there is how we fill the gap of learning how to learn so that everyone can have more access to learning.
Yeah, but I think this is actually a great example, and I completely agree with you. But if you look at where the investment is going in online learning, it's not going into providing tutoring and more support for people who are struggling. It's going into providing professional development for executives or data scientists, or like that's really where the money is going. That's where the attention is going, and that's where the energy is. And in a way, the people who would benefit much more, like we should be building different kinds of tools. We should be investing in more tutoring. Those things are, there isn't quite as much interest by the market. And if you let this be driven by the market, you're not going to put your money into those fields. You're going to put it into data science and those other things. Mm-hmm. So I totally agree with you. It's not that technology will always exacerbate the difference. I mean, that's why I still work in technology, because I haven't given up the hope that it can increase opportunities. But we have to be intentional, and it's really how we design it, how we implement it. If we hold on to those values, then technology can be amazing. But if we let the market drive it too much, sometimes it gets pushed into other directions.
Sure. So you recently acquired a new batch, the father batch, 11 weeks ago.
Tomorrow, 11 weeks.
Tomorrow, 11
and that's
weeks.
Actually, I think that's the best batch I've gotten so far.
It's not on the blockchain yet, but it's real life.
It's not on the blockchain yet. Yeah, no, it turns out the best things are in real life. No, sitting here with you face to face is great. We've known each other for so many years, but it's the personal connections. And I try not to be too, because I work in education broadly, I try not to be too, what's the right word? Professional about having a child, basically. Like I want, I don't want to get too involved in thinking about the education. I want her to just kind of mess around. I mean, maybe that is the right thing, but maybe that is the right approach. That is the research that I guess appeals to me. But, I feel like when I see, especially in the US, the push of the education system to train children at a younger and younger age is really frightening to me here. And so I love children that are wild and that make mistakes and that are messy. And so I'm hoping that I can create a space for my daughter to be, wild and messy and hit her head and, not too hard, but a little bit, and cause trouble. And but it's been really amazing. Like, I have to say, I'm so tired right now because I never sleep. But when that person smiles at you, it's a very special connection.
And I see that you have this human touch in most of your work that you have been doing, like peer-to-peer learning, always thinking on people and the connection and the social connections of people. Going back to your recently acquired batch, as a father. How do you think, or what opportunities do you think that your daughter should have when she's, let's say, graduating from high school in 18 years or something like that? What would you like for her as opportunities?
I would hope that she has the extreme privilege to do things that might go wrong, and that she could fail at things, and that she would be safe to do this. I don't think everyone has that opportunity. I would hope that she has the luxury of being exposed and connecting with people from many different backgrounds and many different places, and that she gets to see them and experience them. That she can be whoever she is, really.
So it will be nice to work so that it is not a luxury, a privilege. It's more democratized, these opportunities of failing and connecting. And
yeah, I mean, this is you're actually making me a little emotional about this, but I think there's so much inequality in the world right now, and she's very fortunate that she's, by no doing of her own, that she is born into a place where it's peaceful. We have resources. She's going to have access to a lot of things that other people don't. And I'm worried that the world will become less stable. I'm worried that the world with climate change and conflict, and so I'm worried about the world. That the things I can't control, the little things I can control, the best we can do is to create space and make that space as big as possible and as safe as necessary, but not safe. And if you can navigate that, I think as a parent, where you're always afraid, of course, to step back and let go and kind of, set this person free in a way, I think that would be great.
Very nice. You made me think a lot on this talk, Philipp. And I expect that people that are hearing us are enjoying also. Do you want to...
Two old guys talking about the internet.
About the US groups. Do you want to give some leads to people to learn more about your work, a URL or something?
I mean, peer-to-peer university is easy. It's p2pu.org, or if you search for peer-to-peer university. There's actually one project that I'm very excited about that we didn't talk so much about. It's called PLIX. It's the Public Library Innovation Exchange. Based on this work with peer-to-peer university, I became very interested in public libraries as an institution, as a platform for education. And the MediaLab is partnering with public libraries to create STEM learning opportunities, mostly for younger learners, but we're trying to expand more to adults, but it's around building things and making things and discovering technology. So PLIX, if you have a public library in your neighborhood that wants to get involved with PLIX, we can send you a kit, or you can use the materials on our website. That would be great. And then
from everywhere in the world.
Everywhere in the world. Okay. Sending kits to everywhere in the world might get tricky, but the kits also are cheap. So we give the whole list, and maybe for less than $30 or $40, you can just buy the things, locally. And then the digital credentials project. I think the best URL right now is digitalcredentials.mit.edu. And there's a contact form if anyone is interested in getting involved there, or they should email you,
yes.
And then they can get involved that way. So I think those are probably the three.
The three leads. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Philipp, for your time. I know that it's getting late and you got to go home for your second job or your first job.
Yeah, I'm actually going out, and I have to go. I'm going out for dinner with my partner, because this is the first time in 11 weeks that we are able to meet for dinner because the parents-in-law are looking after the baby. So it's a
romantic
this
night.
is a very happy, perfect moment for this conversation. And thank you so much for the conversation. I really enjoyed it.
I really enjoyed it too. Thank you, Philipp.
Okay, thank you.
For more information, visit observatory.tech.mx/EduTrends podcast. Thanks to Tecnológico de Monterrey and the Tec Sounds team. Tec Sounds producer, Miguel Mejia. EduTrends producer, Esteban Venegas and Christian Guijosa. Post-production, Max Perez. Stay tuned for the next episode of EduTrends and visit Tec Sounds in your favorite podcast app for other great shows and content.